Before we begin, a quick update. We're now on Spotify. Just search for Whispers of Westeros on Spotify and you'll find us. From now on, we'll be posting new episodes there every single day, and we won't be uploading here anymore. The link is also in the description. See you on Spotify.
The Maester's quill scratched against parchment in the quiet hours before dawn, when even the ravens slept in their cages. Maester Gornath had served House Targaryen for 40 years, long enough to know that some truths were best recorded in silence, away from the curious ears of courtiers and the watchful eyes of kings. He dipped his quill again, the ink black as a moonless night, and continued his chronicle of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, a man he had watched grow from a solemn child into something far more complicated than the songs would ever capture. The prince was born in grief, Gornath wrote, and perhaps that shaped all that followed. The tragedy of Summerhall cast a long shadow over the Targaryen dynasty, though by the time Rhaegar drew his first breath, the ruins had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Yet, the memory lingered like smoke that refused to clear. King Aegon V, dead in the flames he had summoned, along with Sir Duncan the Tall and gods knew how many others. They had tried to wake dragons from stone with wildfire and ancient sorcery, and instead had wakened only death. On that same day, as Summerhall burned, Princess Rhaegar Targaryen screamed in labour. The midwives said later that the smoke blew in through the windows, that the babe was born with the smell of ash and prophecy clinging to him like a call. Prince Aerys, not yet the Mad King, not yet crowned, but already touched by something dark, had looked upon his newborn son with eyes that seemed to see beyond the child before him. "He is the prince that was promised," Aerys had whispered, clutching a scroll he claimed to have found in the Summerhall library before the flames consumed it. "The prophecy speaks of him." Rhaella had wept, whether from joy or sorrow, no one could say. The boy grew up in the shadow of that pronouncement, though for many years he seemed unaware of the weight his father had placed upon him. Maester Gornath remembered young Rhaegar as a peculiar child, too quiet, too thoughtful, with eyes the colour of dark indigo that seemed always to be looking at something no one else could see. While other highborn boys played at swords in the training yard, Rhaegar haunted the library of the Red Keep, his small fingers tracing the faded words of ancient texts. "What troubles you, my prince?" Gornath had asked him once, finding the boy of 7 years, bent over a crumbling volume about the long night. Rhaegar had looked up, and even then his gaze had been unsettling in its intensity. "The darkness came before, Maester. The Maesters wrote that it lasted a generation. How did anyone survive?" "The first men endured," Gornath had replied. "They had the children of the forest to aid them, and the Night's Watch to stand guard." "But the watch is forgotten now," the boy had said softly, "and the children are gone. If the darkness comes again, who will stand?" It was not a question a child should ask, and Gornath had no answer that would satisfy. The Red Keeps. Servants whispered about the prince. In the kitchens, they said he was touched by the gods. In the stables, they claimed he could hear the wind speaking. The Scepters who tried to teach him the 7-pointed star reported that he listened with courtesy, but asked questions that bordered on heresy. Why did the father allow Summerhall to burn? He had asked Scepter Meredith when he was 9. Why did so many die for dragons that never came? The Scepter had spluttered, uncertain whether to chastise or comfort. In the end, she had simply told him to pray for understanding, and the prince had nodded with that too solemn expression he wore like armour. But it was on Dragonstone, during one of the royal family's periodic visits to their ancient seat, that everything changed. Dragonstone rose from the sea like a memory carved in stone. Dragons everywhere, in the walls, in the towers, their shadows seeming to move in the torchlight. The castle had been built with Valyrian sorcery, and even centuries after the doom, one could feel the old magic in the very stones. Rhaegar was 10 years old when he discovered the cache of scrolls in a forgotten corner of the Dragonstone library. The room had been sealed since before Aegon's conquest, its door hidden behind a tapestry of black dragons on red silk. A servant, cleaning in preparation for the royal visit, had accidentally torn the tapestry, revealing the ancient door beneath. Prince Aerys had ordered the room opened, but when the scrolls proved to be written in High Valyrian so archaic that even the maesters struggled to translate them, he had lost interest. Dusty prophecies and forgotten lore, he had declared, his mood already beginning to show the first hints of the instability that would later consume him. Let the prince read them, if he wishes. Perhaps they will teach him something useful. Rhaegar had entered that room as a bookish boy, and emerged as something else entirely. For 3 months he barely left the library. Servants brought him meals that he hardly touched. Maester Gornath tried to assist with translations, but the prince worked with a fevered intensity that troubled the old scholar. The boy's indigo eyes burned with something that looked almost like fear. When the royal family finally returned to King's Landing, Rhaegar requested an audience with the Master at Arms. "I will require a sword," the prince had said, his voice steady despite his youth, "and instruction in its use." Sir Willem Darry, who had known the prince since birth, had been struck speechless. "My prince, you have shown no interest in the blade before." "I must become a knight," Rhaegar had interrupted, and there was iron in his voice that no 10-year-old should possess. "The realm will need me to be more than a scholar with soft hands. I have read the prophecies, Sir Willem. I know what is coming." The transformation was remarkable and troubling. Where once Rhaegar had avoided the training yard, he now threw himself into the study of warfare, with the same intensity he had once reserved for books. Sir Willem reported that the prince was a natural. His slender frame belied a wiry strength, and his scholarly mind adapted quickly to the geometry of swordplay. But there was no joy in it. Rhaegar, trained as a man, might dig his own grave, with grim necessity and no pleasure. "He fights like he's preparing for a war he can already see," Sir Willem had confided to Gornath one evening over wine. "Like he's counting down the days until something terrible arrives." The prince's melancholy deepened as he grew. He played the harp with heartbreaking skill, composing songs so beautiful and sad that servants wept to hear them. Yet he rarely smiled, and the light laughter of other young lords at court seemed foreign to him, as if he were a man of 40 years, trapped in a boy's body. At 15, Rhaegar was knighted by Sir Arthur Dane, who had recently been appointed to the King's Guard. The ceremony took place in the sept of the Red Keep, with all the traditional prayers and oaths. But afterward, in the training yard, Sir Arthur had pulled the young prince aside. "You fight with skill, my prince," the Sword of the Morning had said, his voice low, but also with something like desperation. "What drives you?" Rhaegar had been silent for a long moment, watching the sun set over King's Landing, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. Have you read the prophecies, Sir Arthur, the ancient ones, written when old Valyria still stood? I am a knight, not a scholar. Then let me tell you what they say. Rhaegar's voice had been barely above a whisper. They speak of a prince who will be born of the line of Aerys and Rhaella, born amidst salt and smoke. They speak of a song of ice and fire, and of a prince who will unite the realm against a darkness from beyond the world. Sir Arthur had studied the prince's face, seeing the weight of prophecy there like chains. And you believe yourself to be this prince? I must be, Rhaegar had replied simply. The dragon must have 3 heads. It was written in the scrolls I found on Dragonstone, in words that have not been read for 300 years. The prince that was promised will come from the line of my father and mother. Who else could it be? Prophecy is a treacherous thing, my prince. Men have gone mad trying to fulfill them or prevent them. Then I shall go mad with purpose, Rhaegar had said, and there had been something almost like dark humour in his voice. Better that than to ignore what is written and let the realm fall to darkness. From that day forward, Sir Arthur Dayne became more than just a Kingsguard to Rhaegar. He became a confidant, one of the few people the prince trusted with the full weight of his fears and convictions. But if Rhaegar's burden was prophecy, his torment was his father, King Aerys II. Targaryen had ascended the Iron Throne with promise. In his youth, he had been handsome, charming, full of ambitious plans for the realm. But something in him had curdled over the years, whether it was the madness that seemed to run in the Targaryen blood or some deeper wound, no one could say. By the time Rhaegar reached manhood, his father was a creature of paranoia and cruelty. Aerys saw traitors in every shadow, conspiracies in every council meeting. His hair grew long and wild, his fingernails like talons, and his eyes held a fevered gleam that made even his own Kingsguard uneasy. The king spoke often of wildfire, of burning his enemies, of dragons that would return if only enough fire was set. He kept jars of the volatile substance beneath the Red Keep, and sometimes, in his madness, he would threaten to burn them all, though who they were changed from day to day. Rhaegar watched his father's descent with a helpless horror that he tried to hide behind courtly manners and dutiful silence. But in private, with Sir Arthur, or with his few trusted friends, the prince's anguish showed through. "He is my father," Rhaegar had said once, after Aerys had ordered a man burned alive for the crime of speaking against him. "I am bound by blood and duty to honour him. But what honour is there in standing silent while he destroys what generations of Targaryens built?" "You are young yet, my prince," Sir Arthur had replied carefully, for even walls had ears in the Red Keep. "Your time will come." "Will the realm survive until then?" Rhaegar's voice had been bitter. "Or will my father's madness consume us all before I can claim the crown?" It was treason to speak so, even in private. But it was also truth. In the year 280 AC, when Rhaegar was 21, he married Elia Martell of Dorne. It was a political match, arranged to strengthen the alliance between the crown and the Martells. Elia was beautiful in a delicate way, with large dark eyes and olive skin that spoke of Dornish sun and Rhoynish blood. She was also frail, having been sickly as a child, but her mind was sharp and her heart kind. Rhaegar treated her with courtesy and respect. He was never cruel, never cold. But those who watched knew that his heart was not truly in the marriage. His heart was in prophecy, in ancient scrolls, in the terrible duty he believed awaited him. When Rhaella was born a year later, Rhaegar held his daughter with trembling hands and whispered, "1." When Aegon followed, small and perfect, the prince's eyes had filled with tears. "2," he had said softly. "The dragon must have 3 heads." Elia had looked at him with confusion and concern, but she did not ask what he meant. Perhaps she feared the answer. In the training yard, in the council chambers, in the great hall of the Red Keep, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen was everything a crown prince should be: noble, skilled, courteous, wise beyond his years. The small folk loved him, the lords respected him, and even the most cynical courtiers admitted that he would make a far better king than his father. But Maester Gornath, who had watched the prince since birth, who had seen the weight of prophecy settle on those young shoulders like chains, knew a darker truth. Prince Rhaegar was not preparing to be a king. He was preparing to save the world, or die trying. And in the end, the Maester would write years later, when all was ash and ruin and the prince's body lay beneath the waters of the Trident. Perhaps those 2 things were not so different after all. The Red Keep's throne room fell silent as Prince Rhaegar entered, his footsteps echoing off the high walls where the skulls of dragons watched with empty eyes. It was the year 277 AC, and the prince was 18 years old enough to sit on small councils, old enough to understand that the weight of crown and duty could crush a man as surely as any sword. King Aerys sat the Iron Throne that morning, his long fingernails clicking against the armrests, his hair hanging in greasy tangles past his shoulders. He had cut himself again, climbing to his seat. Small nicks and scratches that he seemed not to notice, though blood spotted his fine robes. "My son," Aerys said, and his voice carried that peculiar quality it had developed of late. Sometimes lucid, sometimes fevered, always unpredictable. "Come, stand beside me while we hear petitions. Let them see the future of House Targaryen." Rhaegar bowed, his face a mask of princely composure, and took his place at the foot of the throne. But Sir Arthur Dayne, standing vigil in his white cloak, saw the tightness around the prince's eyes, the way his hand unconsciously sought the small harp pin he wore, a gift from his mother, a token he touched when troubled. The realm was fracturing, slowly but surely, and everyone in that throne room knew it. In dawn, Princess Elia Martell was preparing for a wedding she hadn't sought, but would accept with grace, as Dornish princesses had done for generations. Her brother Oberyn paced the solar of Sunspear like a caged viper, his dark eyes flashing with barely contained fury. "They mean to use you, Elia. Can you not see it? The Mad King wants Dornish spears and Dornish gold, and in return he offers a melancholy prince who looks at you as if you were a duty to be fulfilled." "All royal marriages are duty, brother," Elia replied softly, though her hands trembled slightly as she folded the letter that had arrived from King's Landing. "At least Prince Rhaegar is said to be kind. That is more than many princesses can claim." "Kind?" Oberyn spat. "He is obsessed. The servants whisper that he speaks of nothing but prophecies and ancient dooms. They say he sees the world ending in fire and ice, that he mutters about dragons and heads and songs that no one else can hear." Doran Martell, their elder brother and heir to Sunspear, placed a restraining hand on Oberyn's shoulder. "Enough. The match is made. Our father has agreed to it, and it will strengthen Dorne's position at court. Aerys grows madder by the day. When he falls, or is removed, Rhaegar will be king, and Elia will be his queen. If she survives the birthing bed, Oberyn said bitterly. The maesters said she should not bear children. Her body is too frail. I will do my duty, Elia interrupted, her voice carrying a strength that belied her delicate frame. As our house has always done, and perhaps... She hesitated, looking out the window toward the gardens, where the sun beat down on orange trees and fountains. Perhaps Prince Rhaegar is not so terrible as the rumours claim. Perhaps he simply carries a burden no one else can see. She would think of those words often in the years to come, and wonder if she had been wise or merely naive. The wedding took place in King's Landing, in the great sept of Baelor, with all the pageantry and ceremony befitting a prince and princess of the realm. Rhaegar wore black and red, the colours of his house, and a cloak sewn with 1,000 rubies that caught the light like dragon scales. Elia wore Dornish silk in shades of gold and orange, her dark hair crowned with a delicate circlet. They spoke the vows before the high septon, their voices steady and clear. When Rhaegar wrapped his cloak around Elia's shoulders, claiming her for House Targaryen, she looked up at him and saw not coldness in his indigo eyes, but a deep and abiding sadness. I will be good to you, he whispered, so low that only she could hear. I swear it by all the gods, old and new. You deserve better than this, but I will try to be worthy. It was not love, but it was honest, and Elia, whose mother had taught her to value honesty above pretty lies, took what comfort she could from that. The feast that followed was magnificent. 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last, with musicians playing and lords and ladies dancing beneath silk pavilions. King Aerys grew drunk and maudlin, speaking loudly of dragons and fire and the glory of old Valyria, until Queen Rhaella quietly suggested he retire. For once, he listened. But Rhaegar did not dance. He sat beside his new wife, speaking with her in low tones about Dorne, about her childhood, about the differences between the harsh north and the warm south. He was courteous, attentive even, but there was a distance in him, as if part of his mind was always elsewhere, contemplating matters beyond the wedding feast. "Do you read, my princess?" he asked at one point. "I do, my prince. Poetry, mostly. The songs of the Rhoynar, the old histories. Have you ever read prophecy?" The question came suddenly, with an intensity that made Elia pause. The old Valyrian texts, or the words of the children of the forest? "No, my lord. Such things are not common in Dorne." Rhaegar nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he had suspected. "Perhaps that is well. Prophecy is a curse disguised as knowledge. It shows you what might come, but never how to prevent it, or if it even should be prevented." Elia had no answer to that, and the prince lapsed back into silence, his long fingers drumming a rhythm against the table that might have been a song only he could hear. A year later, Princess Rhaenys was born. The labour was difficult. Elia's body fought the process, and the Maesters feared for both mother and child. But Dornish women were strong in ways that belied their frames, and Elia survived, though she was weak for months afterward. Rhaegar held his daughter with a reverence that bordered on worship. The babe had her mother's dark Dornish hair and her father's Targaryen eyes, a mixing of bloodlines that created something new and beautiful. "Rhaenys," he whispered, tracing a finger down her soft cheek, "named for the Conqueror's sister, named for dragons and queens and ancient power." Then, so softly that only Sir Arthur, standing guard in the corner, could hear. 1. A year and a half later came Oegon, born with difficulty that nearly killed Aelia. The maesters were blunt afterward. The princess could bear no more children. Her body would not survive another pregnancy. Rhaegar received this news with a strange mixture of grief and frustration that troubled those who witnessed it. He was tender with Aelia during her recovery, reading to her, playing his harp to ease her pain. But there was something in his eyes, a calculation, a weighing of costs and necessities, that made Sir Arthur Dane uneasy. When the prince held his son for the first time, the babe so small and perfect in his arms, tears ran down Rhaegar's face. "Aegon," he said, named for the conqueror himself, named for the prince who united the 7 kingdoms. And then, almost inaudible, 2. But the dragon must have 3 heads. The years that followed were ones of growing tension. King Aerys's madness deepened like rot in timber, slowly at first, then with frightening speed. He became obsessed with wildfire, with burning, with the idea that fire could cleanse all treachery from the realm. Lord Chelsted, his hand, tried to counsel restraint, but the king saw conspiracies everywhere. "They whisper against me," Aerys would say, his voice rising to a shriek. "They plot and scheme. Even my own son looks at me with judgment in his eyes." It was true. Rhaegar made little effort to hide his dismay at his father's actions. When Aerys ordered men burned alive for imagined slights, the prince would leave the throne room rather than watch. When the king spoke of covering King's Landing in wildfire to purify it, Rhaegar openly argued against him before the small council. "You question your king," Aerys had screamed during one such argument. "You dare." "I question madness, your grace," Rhaegar had replied, his voice cold and clear, "and I will not stand silent while it consumes the realm our ancestors built." The throne room had gone deathly silent. For a moment, it seemed Aerys might order his own son seized, burned, destroyed. But Queen Rhaella stepped forward, placing herself between father and son. "The prince speaks from love of the realm. Husband," she said quietly, though her hands shook. "As do you. Perhaps we should adjourn this council and resume when cooler heads prevail." Aerys had stormed from the room, leaving a wake of nervous courtiers and frightened servants. Rhaegar had thanked his mother with a kiss on her hand, but his eyes were distant, calculating. That night he met with Lord John Connington in a private chamber. "It cannot continue," Rhaegar said without preamble. "The realm bleeds. The small folk suffer. My father's madness will tear the 7 kingdoms apart if someone does not act." Connington, who had loved the prince since they were boys together, leaned forward. "What would you have me do, my prince?" "Gather allies, quietly, lords who would support a transition of power. Not rebellion, not patricide, but a peaceful abdication. The Grand Maester could declare him unfit. The Kingsguard could escort him to comfortable captivity. The realm need not burn in the process." "That is treason you speak of," Connington said, though there was no condemnation in his voice. "It is survival," Rhaegar countered, "and if I do not act, then one day my father will wake and decide to burn us all. He keeps wildfire beneath the city, John. Jars and jars of it. Enough to—" The prince's voice trailed off, his face pale. "I have seen what wildfire can do. At Summerhall, it consumed a castle and everyone within it. If my father ever gives that order—" "Then we must ensure he never has the chance," Connington finished. "I will do as you ask, my prince. Discreetly, carefully." But before those careful plans could bear fruit, Rhaegar received a letter that would change everything. The invitation came from Lord Walter Went of Harrenhal, a tourney, the greatest the realm had seen in decades, to celebrate his daughter's name-day. Every great house would attend, every knight who could hold a lance. It would be a gathering unlike any since the time of Aegon the Unlikely. Rhaegar read the letter 3 times, his mind working through possibilities and implications. Then he summoned Sir Arthur Dane. "I will attend this tourney," the prince said, "and I will win it. You are skilled, my prince, but there will be many great knights. I will win it," Rhaegar repeated, with a certainty that seemed to come from some deeper knowing. "And when I do, when all the great lords are gathered in one place, when they see that the crown prince can unite them in celebration, that is when we will act." Sir Arthur studied his prince's face. "You mean to use the tourney as a pretext, to gather your supporters, to make your case for removing the king?" "I mean to save the realm," Rhaegar said simply, "by whatever means necessary. The prophecies speak of a great darkness coming, Sir Arthur. A winter that will last a generation, a night that never ends. How can the realm stand against such a threat if it is tearing itself apart from within? If my father sits the Iron Throne when that darkness comes, we will all perish. And if you are wrong, if the prophecies are merely the ravings of dead men, and you tear down your father for nothing?" Rhaegar's smile was sad and terrible. "Then I will have saved the realm from burning anyway. But I am not wrong. I have read the signs, seen the portents. The darkness is coming, as surely as winter follows summer, and I must be ready." He turned to look out the window toward the Kingswood and the lands beyond. "The dragon must have 3 heads, Sir Arthur. 3 riders for 3 dragons, 3 bloodlines united against the night. I have 2 children, but Elia cannot bear another. And so—" The prince's voice trailed off, but Sir Arthur heard what was left unsaid. The seeds of disaster were being sown in prophecy and desperation, in duty and desire, in a melancholy prince's certainty that he alone could see what must be done. The tourney at Harrenhal would mark the moment when everything changed. In the months before the great gathering, Rhaegar threw himself into preparation with the same intensity he brought to everything. He trained until his hands bled, rode until his horse was lathered with sweat, studied the genealogies of every house that might attend. Elia watched her husband with growing concern. "You push yourself too hard, my lord," she said one evening, finding him in his chambers surrounded by scrolls and maps. "Whatever you seek to accomplish at Harrenhal, it will not be achieved if you collapse from exhaustion first." Rhaegar looked up, and for a moment she saw the full weight of what he carried. Prophecy and duty, love and desperation, the fate of kingdoms balanced on a sword's edge. "I carry the world, Elia," he said quietly. "Or perhaps the world carries me. Either way, I cannot stop. Too much depends on what happens next." "Then let me help you carry it," she offered, moving to sit beside him. "You need not bear every burden alone." He took her hand and kissed it gently. "You have given me 2 perfect children. You have stood beside me through my father's madness and my own obsessions. That is more than I had any right to ask." "And yet you need a 3rd, Elia said, and though her voice was soft, there was steel beneath it. "The maesters have told you I cannot bear another child. I see it in your eyes, my lord, the calculation, the weighing of prophecy against reality. What will you do?" Rhaegar was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I only know that the prophecy is clear. 3 heads has the dragon, 3 riders, 3 bloodlines united. Without that, the realm falls to darkness. Then we shall find a way, Elia said, though her heart was breaking. Together, as husband and wife, as prince and princess. But promise me, Rhaegar, promise you will not lose yourself so completely in prophecy that you forget the people who love you, who stand with you. I promise to try, he said, and it was the most honest answer he could give. But prophecy is a jealous master, and it demands everything from those who would serve it. And at Harrenhal, amidst the banners and the crowds, the laughter and the jousting, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen would see something, someone, that would make him forget every promise, every duty, every careful plan. He would see winter roses and wild beauty, ice and fire, the third head of the dragon made flesh, and the realm would burn for it. The tawny grounds at Harrenhal stretched out like a city unto themselves, pavilions of silk in every colour, banners snapping in the wind, the smell of roasting meat and sweet wine hanging heavy in the air. It was the year 281 AC, and every great house of Westeros had sent their finest knights and their fairest ladies to witness what the singers would later call the last great gathering before the storm. Lord Went's castle loomed behind the grounds, its 5 massive towers reaching toward the sky like the fingers of a giant's hand. Harrenhal was cursed, men said. Every house that held it fell to ruin and death. But on that spring day, with the sun bright and the crowds laughing, such dark thoughts seemed distant and foolish. Maester Yandel, who had travelled from the citadel to chronicle the event, wrote in his journal, "Never have I seen such a gathering of power and pageantry. Every lord who matters is here, and those who do not matter have come to watch those who do." Prince Rhaegar arrived yesterday with a retinue of 50 knights, their armour polished to mirror brightness. The commons cheer his name in the streets, crying, "The prince that was promised," though I suspect few understand what they proclaim. But one person watched the prince's arrival with different eyes entirely. Lyanna Stark stood beside her father, Lord Rickard, in the Stark pavilion, her grey eyes taking in every detail of the tawny grounds, with the sharp attention of a wolf studying its territory. She was 15 years old, wild as a winter wind, and already betrothed to Robert Baratheon, a match that pleased everyone except the bride herself. "Stand still, child," her father said, not unkindly, as Lyanna shifted restlessly. "We are guests here, and you must act the part of a lady." "I'm always acting the part of a lady," Lyanna muttered, low enough that only her brother Brandon heard. He grinned at her, understanding as always. Brandon was everything a Stark should be, tall, handsome, fierce, but he alone among her siblings seemed to grasp that Lyanna's spirit couldn't be caged by expectations and embroidery. "Robert will be here soon," Rickard continued, oblivious to his daughter's discomfort. "Lord Baratheon writes that his son has been training for months. He hopes to win the tourney in your honour." Lyanna said nothing, but her jaw tightened. She had met Robert Baratheon only twice, and both times he had been drunk, boisterous, pawing at serving girls while declaring his love for her in the same breath. He was handsome enough, strong enough, but there was something in him that made her feel like a prize to be won, rather than a person to be loved. "When do the jousts begin?" asked young Ned, quieter than Brandon, but no less eager. Benjen, the youngest, bounced on his toes with excitement. "Tomorrow," Brandon answered. "Today is for arrivals and ceremonies. The prince himself will open the tourney at dawn." At the mention of Prince Rhaegar, Lyanna's attention sharpened. She had heard the songs about him, the silver prince with sad eyes, the warrior poet who played the harp and made women weep. But songs were one thing, reality often disappointed. "I want to see him," she said suddenly. "The prince. Everyone speaks of him as if he were legend made flesh." "You'll see him tomorrow when he rides," her father said. "For now, we should." But Lyanna had already spotted the Targaryen pavilion across the grounds, its black and red silk rippling in the breeze, the three-headed dragon banner flying high, and standing outside it, speaking with a white-cloaked knight, was a tall figure in dark armor. Without thinking, she began walking toward him. "Lyanna," her father called, exasperated. But Brandon laughed and followed after his sister. "Let her go, father. You know there's no stopping her when she's made up her mind." Rhaegar Targaryen stood in council with Sir Arthur Dayne, their voices low and serious, when he became aware of someone approaching with the directness of an arrow toward its target. He looked up to see a young woman in grey and white, her dark hair loose about her shoulders in the northern fashion, her eyes the colour of storm clouds. Behind her came a young man who could only be her brother. They had the same long face, the same grey eyes, the same wolf's bearing. "Prince Rhaegar," the young man said, bowing with northern courtesy. "I am Brandon Stark of Winterfell, and this is my sister, Lyanna. We wish to pay our respects before the tourney begins." Rhaegar bowed in return, and when he straightened, his eyes met Lyanna's. Something passed between them in that moment, recognition of some kind, though neither could have said what they recognized. "Lady Stark," Rhaegar said, and his voice was softer than Lyanna had expected, carrying a quality like music, even in simple speech. "You honor me with your greeting. I have heard tales of Winterfell's strength and the courage of the Stark line." "And I have heard tales of you, my prince," Lyanna replied, meeting his gaze without the demure lowering of eyes that court ladies practiced. "They say you are a warrior and a scholar, both. They say you play the harp and sing songs that make strong men cry." "The songs exaggerate," Rhaegar said, but there was a hint of amusement in his expression. "I play passing well, perhaps, but my singing would make no one cry, except perhaps in pain at my poor pitch." Brandon laughed at that, and the tension of formality eased slightly. But Lyanna continued to study the prince with that unsettling directness. "They also say you speak of prophecies and ancient dooms, that you read books that predict the end of the world." The amusement faded from Rhaegar's face, replaced by something more complex. "The world has ended before, Lady Stark, or nearly so. The Long Night, the doom of Valyria. These are not merely stories to frighten children. They are warnings that the wise would heed." "And you count yourself among the wise?" "I count myself among the desperate," Rhaegar answered quietly, "which is perhaps a different thing entirely." Lyanna opened her mouth to respond, but her father's voice called across the grounds. "Lyanna? Brandon, come! Lord Baratheon has arrived." Brandon grimaced sympathetically at his sister, but Lyanna's face showed nothing. She curtsied to the prince, a gesture so at odds with her wild bearing that it seemed almost mockery, and turned to leave. "Lady Stark," Rhaegar called after her, and she paused. "I look forward to seeing you at the jousts tomorrow. Something tells me you appreciate skilled horsemanship." It was an odd thing to say, oddly specific, and Lyanna studied him for a moment before nodding. "I do, my prince. More than most." As she walked away, Sir Arthur Dane moved closer to Rhaegar. An interesting young woman. Yes, Rhaegar murmured, his eyes still following her retreating form. Yes, she is. He didn't add what he was thinking, that when he looked at her, he had seen something wild and free, something untamed that reminded him of the prophecies written in ancient Valyrian, the union of ice and fire, the meeting of opposites that would forge something new. But prophecy was one thing, reality was another, and Lady Lyanna Stark was betrothed to Robert Baratheon, heir to Storm's End. For now, at least, that had to be enough. The first day of jousting dawned bright and clear, and the stands filled with lords and ladies in their finest silks and velvets. Musicians played, vendors sold wine and roasted fowl, and the commons pressed against the barriers to catch a glimpse of their heroes. Robert Baratheon rode in the third joust, and the crowd roared for him. He was magnificent, tall and powerful, black-haired and blue-eyed, every inch the warrior king he would one day become. He shattered 3 lances against Sir Meryn of the Kingsguard, and won the bout handily, then rode to the Stark pavilion and laid his lance at Lyanna's feet. "For you, my lady," he bellowed, grinning up at her, "the first of many victories in your name." The crowd cheered. Lyanna smiled and waved, playing her part. But Brandon, sitting beside her, saw how her fingers clenched the armrest of her chair, how her smile did not reach her eyes. "He means well," Brandon offered quietly. "He means to possess me," Lyanna replied, just as quiet. Like a hunter possesses a deer he's brought down. Prince Rhaegar did not ride until the afternoon, and when he did, the entire tawny ground seemed to hold its breath. He wore black armor chased with rubies, mounted on a black destrier whose eyes rolled white with spirit. The dragon crest on his helm seemed to breathe fire in the sunlight. His opponent was Sir Barristan Selmy, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, one of the finest knights in all the 7 kingdoms. The first pass ended with both lances shattering, the second likewise. On the third, Rhaegar's lance caught Sir Barristan square in the chest and unhorsed him, a feat that sent the crowd into delirium. But it was what happened next that Lyanna Stark would remember for the rest of her life. After helping Sir Barristan to his feet with courtesy and honour, after accepting the roars of the crowd, Rhaegar turned his horse and rode not to the royal pavilion where his wife Elia sat with their children, but to a different section of the stands. The crowd quieted, confused. Where was he going? Rhaegar rode slowly along the barrier, his eyes searching until they found what they sought. And then, with a movement that seemed inevitable and impossible all at once, he lowered his lance. At its tip was a crown of winter roses, blue as frost, beautiful as first snow. He reached up and lifted the crown from his lance, and every eye in Harrenhal watched as Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, heir to the Iron Throne, married man and father of 2, rode to where Lyanna Stark sat beside her betrothed, and placed the crown of love and beauty in her lap. The silence that followed was absolute, a held breath before a scream. Then the crowd erupted. Some cheered, thinking it a romantic gesture. Others gasped in shock. But those who understood court politics and the weight of symbols felt ice slide down their spines. Robert Baratheon stood, his face purpling with rage. "What?" But Brandon Stark's hand on his arm stopped him. Not here, not now. In the royal pavilion, Princess Elia Martell sat very still, her face pale but composed. She looked down at her children, Rhaenys playing with a wooden dragon, baby Aegon sleeping in his nurse's arms, and said nothing. Queen Rhaella covered her mouth with her hand. King Aerys, present for once, began to laugh, a high, mad sound that chilled everyone who heard it. "The dragon takes what the dragon wants," he crowed, "as is proper, as is right." And Lyanna Stark, wolf blood roaring in her ears, stared down at the crown of winter roses in her lap. They were beautiful, delicate things, so unlike the harsh winter roses that grew wild in the north, yet somehow the same. She looked up at Prince Rhaegar and saw in his eyes something she had never seen before. Not possession, not conquest, recognition. As if he looked at her and saw not a prize or a pretty face, but an answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. She should have thrown the crown back at him, should have laughed it off as a jest, should have given it to Robert and smoothed over the insult before it could fester. Instead, she lifted it to her hair and placed it on her head amidst the dark strands that no northern woman was supposed to wear so loose and wild. The crowd's roar changed pitch, shock shifting to scandal, curiosity edging toward catastrophe. And in that moment, with winter roses crowning the she-wolf of Winterfell, with the dragon prince watching her with eyes like prophecy made flesh, the first stone began to roll down the mountain that would become an avalanche. Robert Baratheon's face twisted with jealous fury. Brandon Stark's hand tightened on his sword. Lord Rickard Stark stood, seeking to control a situation that was already beyond controlling. But it was too late. The tourney at Harrenhal would end in laughter and celebration, in great feasts and fine wine. The lords would return to their castles, the knights to their holdfasts, the small folk to their villages. But something had changed, irrevocably and completely. The dragon had chosen his third head, and the realm would bleed for it. That night, Lyanna slipped away from the feast, away from Robert's sullen drunkenness, away from her father's disapproving glances, away from the whispers that followed her like hounds. She walked in the godswood that bordered Harrenhal's cursed walls, seeking the quiet comfort of the old gods, the rustle of leaves, and the smell of earth. And found Prince Rhaegar there before her, sitting beneath a weirwood tree with his harp in his hands. He was playing a song, low and haunting, full of longing and sorrow. The notes seemed to speak of winter coming, of darkness gathering, of desperate hopes and doomed loves. Lyanna stood in the shadows and listened, unnoticed, as the prince played. And when the song ended, when the last note faded into the rustling leaves, she stepped forward. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. Rhaegar looked up, unsurprised, as if he had known she would come. "It is a song about the long night, about the hero who stood against the darkness with fire and ice, with love and sacrifice. The songs don't remember his name, but they remember what he gave." "Everything," Lyanna said, understanding somehow. "He gave everything." "Yes." Rhaegar set down his harp and stood, tall and silver in the moonlight. "I should not have crowned you today. It was foolish, reckless. It has caused you trouble." "Yes," Lyanna agreed. "It was all of those things. And yet, I cannot bring myself to regret it." His voice was barely above a whisper. "When I saw you yesterday, when you spoke to me with such fire and fearlessness, I knew—" He stopped himself. "I'm sorry. This is madness. You are betrothed. I am married. There are prophecies and duties, and—" "What did you know?" Lyanna interrupted, moving closer. Her heart was pounding, her wolf blood singing. "When you saw me, what did you know?" Rhaegar looked at her for a long moment, and in his eyes she saw prophecy and desperation, duty and desire, all warring together. that the song is not just fire, he said finally. It is ice and fire both. 3 heads has the dragon, and I have only 2 children, but the 3rd. He reached out slowly, giving her time to step back, and touched one of the winter roses in her hair. The 3rd must be born of ice and fire united, a wolf and a dragon, winter and flame. You're speaking madness, Lyanna whispered, but she did not pull away. I know, Rhaegar said, and yet the prophecies are never wrong. The darkness is coming, Lyanna Stark. I have read it in books 300 years old. I have seen it in my dreams, and when it comes, the realm must be ready. The prince that was promised must be ready. And you think Lyanna couldn't finish the sentence. It was too mad, too impossible. And yet something in her, something wild and fierce and utterly reckless, whispered yes. I think, Rhaegar said carefully, that you are the bravest person I have ever met, and that prophecy brought us together for a reason. They stood there in the godswood, ice and fire, wolf and dragon, while the leaves whispered overhead and the realms slept, unknowing. And somewhere in the distance, winter waited. The Raven arrived at the Red Keep 3 days after the tourney at Harrenhal ended, its wings dark against the morning sky. The maester who received it noted in his journal that the bird seemed exhausted, as if it had flown without rest, bearing news that could not wait. The message was brief, written in a shaking hand. Prince Rhaegar has taken Lyanna Stark. Gods help us all. It was the year 282 AC, and the realm was about to tear itself apart. Brandon Stark rode for King's Landing like a man possessed, his horse lathered with foam, his companions, Ethan Glover, Geoffrey Mallister, Kyle Royce, and Elbert Arryn, struggling to keep pace. They had been riding toward Riverrun, where Brandon was to marry Catelyn Tully in a fortnight, when word reached them. Lyanna is gone, the messenger had said, his face pale. Vanished from Winterfell. Lord Rickard's men found her chambers empty, her clothes missing, and the stable boy says he saw her ride out at dawn with a cloaked man on horseback. Brandon had not waited to hear more. His sister, his wild, fierce sister, taken by the Dragon Prince. It could mean only one thing: abduction, rape, dishonor. The thought of it drove him mad with rage. They reached King's Landing in record time, their horses near death, and Brandon did not bother with courtesy or protocol. He rode straight to the Red Keep, through the outer gates, past the guards who tried to stop him, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Rhaegar, come out and die." The words echoed off the stone walls, carrying through the throne room where King Aerys sat picking at his fingernails with a blade, through the corridors where servants froze in terror, through the chambers where courtiers whispered and schemed. "Rhaegar Targaryen, face me, you craven. You've dishonored my sister and my house. Come out and die." The Kingsguard moved to seize him, but Brandon drew his sword. Northern steel, sharp as winter, and his companions did the same. For a moment, it seemed blood would be spilled in the Red Keep's courtyard. Then, King Aerys himself appeared at a high window, his hair wild, his eyes bright with the madness that had consumed him utterly. "The wolf barks at the dragon," he shrieked, and his laughter was terrible to hear. Seize them all. They threaten the crown prince. They threaten my son." "Your son is a kidnapper and a rapist," Brandon shouted back. "Release my sister and face justice." But Aerys was beyond reason, beyond any pretense of sanity. "Justice. I am justice. I am the king. Guards, take them to the dungeons. Take them all." The Kingsguard white cloaks that should have stood for honor and protection, moved with grim efficiency. Brandon and his companions fought, but they were outnumbered, exhausted from their ride, unprepared for treachery in the very heart of the king's peace. One by one, they were disarmed and dragged to the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, where the walls wept with moisture and the air tasted of despair. Lord Rhaegar Stark received the Raven at Winterfell, where he had been planning his son's wedding and organizing search parties for his daughter. The message bore the king's seal, and it turned his blood to ice. Your son Brandon has threatened the Crown Prince and raised steel in the Red Keep. He is charged with treason. You will come to King's Landing to answer for his crimes, or he dies. Rickard read the message 3 times, each reading bringing fresh horror. His wild daughter gone, his fierce son imprisoned, and the Mad King demanding he place himself in Aerys's power. "My lord?" Maester Wallace asked gently. "What will you do?" Rickard Stark stood at the window of his solar, looking out at Winterfell's grey walls, at the Godswood where his children had played, at the north that stretched away in all directions, harsh, beautiful, unforgiving, and true. "I will go," he said quietly. "I am a lord of the north. When my son stands accused, I stand with him. That is what Starks do." "My lord, this could be a trap." "Of course it's a trap," Rickard interrupted, his voice heavy with the weight of duty. "But if I do not go, Brandon dies. And if I run, if I hide in the north, then the king's wrath will fall on every village and hold fast between here and King's Landing. No, I will go to King's Landing. I will face the Mad King, and I will demand justice." He turned to face his Maester, and there were tears in his eyes, the first Maester Wallace had ever seen him shed. "If I do not return, tell Ned, tell him the north is his now. Tell him to be wise where I was bold, to be patient where I was rash. Tell him—" His voice broke. "Tell him I tried to save them, both of them." 3 days later, Lord Rickard Stark rode south with 200 men. They wore no armour, carried no battle banners. This was not an invasion, but a father going to save his son. They never saw Winterfell again. In a tower, far to the south, in the red mountains of Dawn, where few travellers ventured, Lyanna Stark woke to sunlight streaming through windows carved with ancient patterns. She had not been dragged here in chains. She had not been taken against her will. Whatever the ravens might claim, whatever Brandon might believe, she had chosen to come. 3 months earlier, in the Godswood at Harrenhal. "Come with me," Rhaegar had said, his voice urgent and low. "Not now, not tonight, but soon. The prophecy must be fulfilled, Lyanna. The realm depends on it." "You ask me to abandon my family," she had replied, though her heart was already answering. "To break my betrothal, to dishonour my house." "I ask you to save the world," Rhaegar had said, and there was such desperate certainty in his eyes. "I have read the prophecies. I have seen what is coming. The long night will return, Lyanna. The darkness from beyond the wall will sweep south, and only the prince that was promised can stand against it. Only the song of ice and fire can give us hope." "You speak in riddles and ancient words," Lyanna had said, but she had not pulled away from his touch on her hand. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I have dreamed it," Rhaegar had whispered. "Every night since I was a boy. I dream of ice covering the world, of darkness that eats the light, of dead things walking with blue eyes and frozen hearts. And I dream of a child born of ice and fire, of wolf and dragon, who stands at the end of the world with a flaming sword and holds back the night." Lyanna had looked into his eyes and seen truth there, or madness, or perhaps both at once. And something in her, something that had always chafed at the bonds of duty, that had always longed for something more than needlework and marriage beds, had whispered yes. "If I come with you," she'd said carefully, "Robert will call it abduction, Brandon will call it rape, the realm will call it treason." "I know," Rhaegar had said, "and I will bear that burden. Let them curse my name. Let them call me villain and monster. If the alternative is the world dying in darkness, then I will gladly be the monster that saves it." "You're mad," Lyanna had said. "Probably," Rhaegar had agreed. "But are you brave enough to be mad with me?" And Lyanna Stark, who had never wanted to be a proper lady, who had always felt the wolf blood singing too fierce in her veins, who looked at Robert Baratheon and saw only a cage, Lyanna had said yes. Now, in the Tower of Joy, as Rhaegar had named it, with a poeticism that made her smile despite everything, Lyanna stood at the window and watched the sun rise over the red mountains. Behind her, she heard Rhaegar moving in the chamber, and she turned to face him. "Brandon has gone to King's Landing," she said quietly. She did not ask how she knew. The ravens had brought word, and Sir Arthur Dayne, standing guard below, had told them everything. "He's demanding you face him, calling you a kidnapper." Rhaegar's face was drawn with guilt and sorrow. "I know. And my father... Gods, my father." He sat heavily on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "I thought I had more time. I thought I could speak to the great lords first, explain the necessity, make them understand." "No one will understand," Lyanna said, moving to sit beside him. "How could they? We barely understand it ourselves." "I should go to King's Landing," Rhaegar said, but his voice was hollow. "I should face Brandon, explain—" "You cannot." Lyanna took his hand, surprised at how natural the gesture had become. "If you leave now, if you go to face Brandon and your father, what happens to the prophecy? What happens to—" She placed a hand on her belly, where no life yet grew, but might soon. "What happens to the child who is supposed to save the world?" Rhaegar looked at her, and his eyes were filled with tears. "People are going to die, Lyanna, because of what we've done, because of what I believed was necessary. People are going to die." "I know," she said, and her own eyes were wet. "Brandon, my father, if he goes south to defend him, Robert will call his banners, houses will burn, the realm will tear itself apart." "We could stop it," Rhaegar said desperately. "If I went to King's Landing now, if I explained—" "Your father is mad," Lyanna said bluntly. "You've told me so yourself. He won't listen to reason. He'll execute Brandon regardless of what you say, and probably you as well for embarrassing him. And then, where is the prophecy? Where is the child who is supposed to stand against the darkness?" Rhaegar stood and walked to the window, his shoulders bowed with the weight of his choices. "How many lives is one prophecy worth, Lyanna? How much blood can be justified in the name of a dream?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But we've made our choice. We're here, in this tower, because we believed, because we still believe, that something worse is coming. Something that will kill far more than any war between houses." She joined him at the window, and together they looked out at the world they had set aflame with their decision. "The White Walkers," Rhaegar said softly. "The others, the cold gods. They have 1,000 names in the old texts, but they all describe the same thing. Death itself, walking on legs of ice, wielding swords that shatter steel and freeze the soul. And you truly believe they're returning? I know they are, Rhaegar said with terrible certainty. I have seen too many signs, read too many prophecies. The seasons grow longer. Winter lingers. Strange things are reported from beyond the wall. Wildlings fleeing south, talking of cold winds and pale shapes in the snow. The Night's Watch sends ravens speaking of rangers who disappear without trace. It's beginning, Lyanna. Slowly, subtly, but it's beginning. Then we were right to do this, Lyanna said, though her voice shook. Whatever the cost, however many die, we were right. But she thought of Brandon, her fierce brother, who loved her so much he had ridden to King's Landing alone to demand justice. She thought of her father, who would come south to save his son and walk into a trap. She thought of Robert, whose rage and grief would spark a rebellion that would consume the realm. And she wondered if being right was enough. In King's Landing, the trial, if it could be called that, was a mockery of justice. King Aerys had Brandon Stark and his companions brought to the throne room in chains. He sat, the Iron Throne, with a smile on his face, his mad eyes glittering with malicious glee. "You came to my city," he said, his voice high and cracking. "You threatened my son. You raised steel in the king's peace. What say you, Wolflord? What defense do you offer?" Brandon, gaunt from days in the dungeons, but unbowed, raised his head. "My sister was taken by your son. I demand justice. I demand trial by combat." Trial by combat? Aerys leaned forward, and his smile was terrible. "Oh, you shall have your trial by combat, but not against my son. He is not here to face you, having abandoned his duties, his wife, his children, everything." The king's voice rose to a shriek. "No, your trial shall be against a different opponent." He gestured, and servants brought forward a contraption of rope and metal, a device that would later be called the Strangler's Noose. They suspended Brandon from the ceiling by a leather cord around his neck, just close enough to solid ground that he could touch it with his toes if he stood on them. And then, just out of his reach, they placed his sword. "You want to defend yourself," Aerys said, giggling like a child with a cruel toy. "Then reach for your sword, wolf cub. Defend yourself." Brandon struggled, stretching, fighting to reach the blade. But every movement pulled the noose tighter. Every attempt to save himself brought him closer to death. And then they brought in Lord Rhaegar Stark. They made him watch as his son strangled himself trying to reach salvation. They made him watch as Brandon's face turned purple, as his movements grew weaker, as the life left his eyes. And then came Aerys's true madness. "Trial by combat," the king said, still smiling, "but not by sword, by fire. Let the gods decide your guilt or innocence, Lord Stark. Let the fire judge you." They suspended Rhaegar Stark in his own armor, and beneath him they placed wildfire, green and terrible, burning hotter than any natural flame. The Lord of Winterfell burned alive in his own armor while his son watched, until Brandon finally strangled himself to death trying to reach the sword that would have ended his father's agony. The throne room filled with the smell of burning flesh and the screams of dying men. Courtiers vomited. Guards looked away. Even some of the Kingsguard, sworn to obey their king, felt their resolve waver. When it was done, when two of the Great North's finest had been murdered in the most horrific fashion imaginable, Aerys looked around at his court with satisfaction. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "This is what happens to those who threaten the dragon. Send word to Lord Arryn. I want Eddard Stark's head, and Robert Baratheon's as well. They fostered in the Eyrie, they are friends of traitors, and I will have them before me in chains. But Lord Jon Arryn, when the demand reached him, looked at the raven bearing the Mad King's seal and said 3 words that changed everything. I refuse. The rebellion that followed would bear Robert Baratheon's name, but it was born in that moment, when a father and son were murdered in the cruelest fashion imaginable, when an old lord looked at his king's demands and said no, when the realm finally understood that Aerys II Targaryen was not merely mad, but monstrous. And in the Tower of Joy, far from the gathering storm, Rhaegar Targaryen received the news and wept. "What have I done?" he whispered, the raven's message crushed in his hand. "What have I done?" Lyanna had no answer. She could only hold him as he broke, as the weight of his choices, prophecy and desire, duty and love, the fate of the world balanced against the lives of good men, crushed him utterly. "The darkness is coming," he said, his voice hollow. "I had to do this. I had to." But even he no longer sounded certain. And winter, ever patient, continued its slow march south. The sound of war reached even the Tower of Joy. Not the clash of steel or the screams of dying men. Those were too distant, too far north, where armies clashed and kingdoms burned. But news travelled on raven wings, carried by Sir Arthur Dayne, who rode periodically to gather provisions and return with reports that grew darker with each telling. "Storm's End has declared for Robert," he told Rhaegar one morning, his face grim. "The Riverlands follow, and the North marches south with whatever strength they can muster. Your father's madness has united them, my prince. They call themselves rebels, but in truth they seek justice for murdered lords and stolen daughters." Rhaegar stood at the tower window, his hand pressed against the warm stone. Below, Lyanna walked in the small garden they had planted. Winter roses, improbably blooming in dawn's heat. She was 3 months with child now, the slight swell of her belly visible beneath her loose gown, the prophecy taking flesh, the 3rd head of the dragon growing in her womb, and the realm was burning to ash because of it. "What news of the battles?" Rhaegar asked, his voice flat. "Lord Connington holds the stony sept, but Robert's forces harry him. The reach musters for the crown. Lord Tyrell will bring his strength to your father's cause. The Westerlands watch and wait, though Tywin Lannister has made no declaration." "Tywin watches to see who will win," Rhaegar said bitterly. "He always does. And my wife? My children?" "Safe in the Red Keep, under guard. Princess Elia asks after you in her letters. Arthur hesitated. "She knows, my prince. About Lady Lyanna. About why you... She knows." "And does she hate me?" Rhaegar's voice broke on the question. "She loves you," Arthur replied quietly, "which may be worse. She writes that she understands about the prophecy, that she would have borne you a 3rd child if she could, that she knows you did what you believed necessary. But understanding is not the same as forgiveness, and love is not the same as healing." Rhaegar closed his eyes, and a tear traced down his cheek. "I have destroyed everything. My wife, my honor, my family's name. And for what? A dream? A prophecy written by dead men 300 years ago?" "For the realm," came Lyanna's voice from the doorway. She had climbed the stairs silently, her hand resting on her swelling stomach. "For the world, for the child who will stand against the darkness when it comes." She crossed to stand beside him, and together they looked out at dawn's red mountains, beautiful, harsh, unforgiving, like the choices they had made. Men are dying, Lyanna, Rhaegar said. Good men, loyal men. They die because I could not keep my hands from you, because I believed a prophecy over my vows. They die because your father is a monster, Lyanna corrected sharply. They die because he murdered my father and brother in cold blood, because he demanded Jon Arryn deliver Robert and Ned to him for execution. This war would have come eventually, Rhaegar. Your father's madness ensured that. We simply hastened it. A convenient absolution, Rhaegar murmured. The truth, Lyanna insisted. She took his hand, placed it on her belly where their child grew. Do you feel that? That's real. Not a prophecy, not a dream. A real child who will be born into this world. A child of ice and fire. And when the darkness comes, and it will come, you've shown me too many proofs for me to doubt. This child will matter. This child will be what saves us. Rhaegar looked down at her, this northern girl who had given up everything for a dream she barely understood, who stood beside him even as the realm condemned them both. I should have waited, he said, after my father's death, after I became king. Then I could have set Elia aside, married you properly, legitimized the child. And the prophecy, Lyanna interrupted. Did it say the prince who was promised would be born after you were crowned? Did it give you years to prepare? Or did it demand what it demanded when it demanded it? Rhaegar had no answer to that. The prophecies had been maddeningly vague on timing, speaking only of signs and portents, a red comet, a long summer ending, the prince born of Aerys and Rhaella's line. He had interpreted them as best he could, but perhaps he had simply seen what he wanted to see. My prince, Arthur said carefully, interrupting his dark thoughts. There is more news. Lord Tywin has finally declared for the crown. He marches on the Trident with the royal army. Your father demands your presence. He says the realm must see the crown prince leading the king's forces, must see that you have not abandoned your duty. My duty, Rhaegar repeated hollowly. Does my father know what that word means any more? He knows that Robert Baratheon's forces gather strength each day, and that the lords who fight for the crown whisper that their prince has forsaken them for a northern girl. They say... Arthur hesitated again. Say it, Rhaegar commanded. They say you are craven, that you hide in a tower while good men die in your name. That prophecy has made you mad, like your father. Silence fell, broken only by the wind whistling through the tower's windows. Finally, Lyanna spoke. You have to go. No? Yes. Her voice was firm, though tears gathered in her grey eyes. You have to go, Rhaegar. Not because your father commands it, not because the realm demands it, but because if you don't, this war will never end. Robert will hunt you forever. He'll tear apart every holdfast and burn every village until he finds me and kills you. The only way this ends is if you face him. I could defeat him, Rhaegar said. I could take you far away, to Essos, beyond his reach. And abandon the realm to your father's madness? Abandon your children to whatever fate awaits them? Abandon the prophecy you've sacrificed everything for? Lyanna shook her head. No, you're the prince, Rhaegar, the prince that was promised, and sometimes princes have to fight. I could die. Everyone dies, Lyanna said simply. The question is what we die for. You would die to protect this child, to give the realm a chance against the darkness. That's worth dying for. Rhaegar pulled her close, burying his face in her dark hair. I don't want to leave you. Not now. Not when... I'll be safe here, Lyanna whispered. Sir Arthur will stay with me, and Sir Oswell and Sir Gerald. You'll leave them here too, to protect the tower, to protect the prince who was promised when he's born. She, Rhaegar corrected automatically. I've dreamed it's a boy. I've seen him in my visions. Your grey eyes, my dark hair, a wolf and a dragon all at once. Then protect him, Lyanna said. Go north, face Robert, win if you can, but if you cannot... Her voice broke. If you cannot, know that I will raise our son to be everything the prophecy demands. I will teach him his duty, his purpose. I will make sure he understands what you sacrificed. His name, Rhaegar said suddenly. If it's a boy, name him Aegon, for the conqueror, for the prince who united the 7 kingdoms. You already have a son named Aegon, Lyanna pointed out gently. Aegon, 6th of his name, Rhaegar said, and there was something in his voice, prophecy, or madness, or desperate hope. The prince that was promised, the song of ice and fire made flesh. He kissed her then, soft and desperate, pouring into it all the words he could not say. And Lyanna kissed him back, this man who had destroyed her life and given her purpose all at once, this prince who believed so completely that the world needed saving that he had torn it apart to do so. When they finally parted, Rhaegar turned to Sir Arthur. Choose your best men. We ride for the Trident in 3 days. And Arthur, promise me you'll protect her. Promise me that whatever happens, the child will be born safe. I swear it, my prince, Arthur said, kneeling. By my sword, by my honour, by everything I hold sacred, I will guard them both until my last breath. That may be what it costs, Rhaegar said quietly. When Robert learns she's here, when he comes for her, and he will come, you may have to die to stop him. Then I will die, Arthur said simply. That is what the Kingsguard does. 3 days later, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen rode out from the Tower of Joy with 12 knights at his back. He wore his black armour, with the rubies worked into the breastplate, each stone worth a small fortune. His horse was the finest Dornish sandsteed, bred for endurance and speed. His sword was castle-forged steel, sharp enough to split hairs. He looked every inch the warrior prince, the heir to the Iron Throne, the hope of House Targaryen. But Lyanna, watching from the tower window, saw only a man riding toward his death. The journey north took weeks. Through Dawn's passes, up the Prince's Pass into the Reach, then northeast toward the Riverlands, where armies clashed and the Trident ran red with blood. Rhaegar rode in silence for most of the journey, speaking little even to his companions. But at night, when they made camp, he would take out his harp and play. Sad songs, beautiful songs, songs that spoke of love and loss and choices that could never be unmade. One night, Ser Barristan Selmy, who had joined the prince's escort from King's Landing, sat beside him as he played. "You know you're riding to your death, don't you?" the old knight said quietly. Rhaegar's fingers stilled on the strings. "Yes. And you go anyway." "I must. The realm cannot heal while I hide, and—" Rhaegar looked up at the stars, cold and distant. "I have dreamed this, Ser Barristan. I have seen the Trident in my sleep, seen the water running red, seen rubies scattered in the stream like drops of blood. I know how this ends." "Dreams can be changed," Barristan said. "Prophecies can be false." "Can they?" Rhaegar smiled, but there was no humour in it. "I have lived my entire life according to prophecy. I have read the ancient texts, followed the signs, sacrificed everything for what I believed was necessary. If I stop believing now, if I decide it was all for nothing—" He shook his head. "Then I destroyed my family, my honour, my kingdom for a lie. I cannot face that. I would rather die believing I was right. And Lady Lyanna, your child? Will be protected, Rhaegar said with certainty. Sir Arthur and the others will guard them. And if I fall, if Robert wins this war and sits the Iron Throne, perhaps he will be merciful. Perhaps he will let Lyanna live. Let the child live. In time, when the darkness comes and the realm needs the prince that was promised, perhaps my son will be ready. You're asking a great deal of perhaps, Barristan observed. I have nothing else left to ask, Rhaegar replied, and began to play again, a song about duty and sacrifice, about princes who gave everything and kings who fell. The royal army met Robert Baratheon's forces at the ford of the Trident on a day when the sky wept rain. Thousands of men faced each other across the water. Targaryen banners of red and black, Baratheon stags, Tully fish, Stark direwolves, Arryn falcons, all mingled together in the rebel army. On the crown side flew the dragon alongside Tyrell roses, Tarly huntsmen, and 100 lesser houses who had declared for King Aerys out of fear, duty, or opportunism. Rhaegar sat his horse at the ford's edge, the water rushing around its hooves, and watched Robert Baratheon ride forward. The man who had been his rival, who had been betrothed to Lyanna, who had cause beyond measure to hate him. Robert was magnificent in his fury, tall and powerful, his armour black as night, his warhammer held loose in one hand as if it weighed nothing. Rhaegar! Robert's voice carried across the water, filled with rage and pain. Where is she? Where is Lyanna? Safe, Rhaegar called back, and willing. She came with me of her own choice, Robert. I swear it. Liar, Robert's face purpled. You stole her, raped her, and your father murdered her family while you hid like a coward. My father is mad, Rhaegar said, and his voice carried no defense, no justification. His actions are his own. But Lyanna, Robert, she never wanted to marry you. She told me so herself. She came with me because... I don't care why, Robert roared. You took her, you dishonoured her, and now you'll die for it. He spurred his horse forward, splashing into the Trident's ford. And Rhaegar, knowing this was always how it would end, knowing the prophecies were never meant to save him, rode to meet his fate. They met in the middle of the ford, where the water ran swift and cold. Rhaegar's lance shattered against Robert's shield. Robert's hammer swung, missing by inches, as Rhaegar's horse shied away. They circled, struck again, the sound of impact like thunder. Around them, the battle raged. Thousands of men killing each other in the rain, the trident running red with blood. But in that moment, there were only two men who had loved the same woman and chosen opposite sides. She was mine, Robert screamed, swinging his hammer in great arcs. Promised to me, and you stole her. She was never yours, Rhaegar replied, parrying desperately. She was never anyone's but her own. Then where is she now, hidden in some tower while you play at war? What kind of love is that? Rhaegar had no answer, because Robert was right. He had taken Lyanna from her home, gotten her with child, and left her isolated in Dorne, while he rode to battle. What kind of love, indeed? Perhaps prophecy had always been an excuse. Perhaps he had simply wanted her, and dressed his desire in ancient words to make it seem noble. The thought shattered his concentration for just a moment. It was enough. Robert's warhammer caught him full in the chest, crushing the ruby-studded breastplate, driving the air from his lungs. Rhaegar felt himself falling, felt the cold water of the trident close over him, felt the rubies scatter into the stream like drops of blood. just as he had dreamed, just as the prophecy had shown. He lay in the water, unable to breathe, unable to move, and Robert Baratheon stood over him with his hammer raised for the final blow. "For Lyanna," Robert said, and brought the hammer down. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen died in the waters of the Trident, with his last thoughts on a tower far to the south, on a woman with grey eyes and wild hair, on a child not yet born who was supposed to save the world. "The dragon must have 3 heads," he whispered, but the words were lost in the rushing water, and the rubies from his armour scattered into the stream, where they would remain for years, a memorial to the prince who believed so completely in prophecy that he destroyed everything for it. The royal army broke when their prince fell. Men threw down their weapons and ran. Lord Tywin, watching from a distance, turned his forces around and marched back toward King's Landing, already planning how to be on the winning side. The war was not over. The Mad King still sat the Iron Throne, still commanded wildfire and madness. But everyone knew, looking at Robert Baratheon, standing triumphant in the Trident with Rhaegar's blood on his hammer, that it was only a matter of time. The dragon was dead. Long live the stag. The news of Rhaegar's death reached King's Landing on wings of black feathers, and the realm held its breath. Maester Pycelle read the message 3 times before his hands began to tremble. He was old, had served the crown for decades, and thought himself beyond shock. But the words written in Lord Tywin's careful script seemed impossible, even as they announced the inevitable. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen fell at the Trident. Robert Baratheon's forces advance on King's Landing. The war is lost. The Grand Maester climbed the steps to the throne room slowly, feeling every one of his years. Behind the great doors, he could hear King Aerys shrieking about something. Wildfire, probably, or traitors, or dragons that would never come. When Pycelle entered, he found the king pacing before the Iron Throne, his fingernails clicking against each other, his hair hanging in greasy ropes to his waist. Queen Rhaella sat in the corner with little Viserys in her arms, her face pale and drawn. She already knew, a mother's heart always knew, that her eldest son was dead. "Your Grace," Pycelle began, his voice cracking, "I bear grave news from the Trident." "Rhaegar is dead," Aerys said, flatly, and laughed. That terrible, high laugh that had haunted the Red Keep for years. "My son, my heir, dead in a river like a drowned rat. The dragon brought down by a stag with a hammer. How poetic, how perfectly, beautifully tragic." "Your Grace," Pycelle tried again, "Lord Tywin Lannister approaches the city with his army. He claims to come as your ally, but—" "But you think he comes to betray me?" Aerys interrupted, his eyes glittering with mad certainty. "You think Tywin, who served my father so faithfully, who was my hand until I grew tired of his smugness, you think he would turn his cloak now? Your Grace, with respect, Lord Tywin hasn't declared for you until this moment. His timing is suspect." "Let him come!" Aerys shrieked. "Let them all come. I have a surprise for them. I have wildfire, jars and jars of it, placed beneath every sept, every tavern, every street in this city. If they think to take my throne, I'll burn it all. I'll burn them all. I'll burn the whole world before I let Robert Baratheon sit where Aegon the Conqueror once sat." The throne room fell silent. Even the guards shifted uneasily. Queen Rhaella stood slowly, still holding Viserys. "Husband," she said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Our son is dead. Our family bleeds. For the love of the gods, for the memory of what we once were, do not do this. Do not destroy the city our ancestors built. Our ancestors conquered this city with fire and blood, Aerys screamed, and I will end it the same way. Fire and blood, fire and blood. He turned to Sir Jaime Lannister, the youngest of the Kingsguard, golden-haired and barely 20. You, tell your father that if he enters this city, I'll burn it to ash. Tell him the dragon's fire still has teeth. Jaime Lannister said nothing, but his green eyes watched the Mad King with an expression that Pycelle could not quite read. In the royal chambers, Princess Aelia Martell held her children close and listened to the sounds of the city preparing for siege. Rhaenys, almost 4 years old, played with her wooden dolls, princes and princesses locked in eternal courtly dance. Little Aegon slept in his cradle, unaware that his father was dead, that his grandfather was mad, that armies approached to tear down everything the Targaryens had built. "Mama, where is Papa?" Rhaenys asked, looking up with her father's indigo eyes. "He's been gone so long." Aelia's throat tightened. How did you tell a child that her father had died for a prophecy? For another woman? For a dream of saving a world that didn't want saving? "Your father was very brave," she said carefully. "He rode to war to protect the realm. Will he come back?" "No, sweetling, he won't come back." Rhaenys processed this with the strange acceptance of childhood. "Did the bad men hurt him?" "Yes," Aelia whispered. "They did." "Then I'll hurt them back when I'm big," Rhaenys declared with fierce certainty. "I'll be a warrior princess like Queen Nymeria, and I'll make them sorry." Aelia pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her hair, soap and sweet oil and innocence that would not last much longer. "You will be whatever you need to be, my dragon, strong and brave and true." But even as she spoke the words, Elia felt the cold wind of fate blowing through the Red Keep's corridors. She had read enough histories to know how sieges ended, how fallen dynasties were treated, how victorious rebels dealt with the children of deposed kings. She looked down at Aegon, sleeping peacefully in his cradle. The child Rhaegar had named for the conqueror, the second head of the dragon he had been so desperate to create before abandoning them all for prophecy and northern girls. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her children. "I'm so sorry your father loved you, but loved his dreams more." Lord Tywin Lannister's army approached King's Landing 3 days after Rhaegar's death, 20,000 strong and flying the Lannister lion alongside the Targaryen dragon. The gates were barred, the walls manned. King Aerys had ordered that no one enter or leave the city on pain of death. But Tywin was nothing if not patient. He sent a herald to the walls with a message for the king. "I come as your loyal servant, your grace. Open your gates and let me help you defend against the rebels. My sword is yours." Grand Maester Pycelle, who owed more to House Lannister than to House Targaryen, counselled the king to accept. "Lord Tywin brings fresh troops, your grace. With his strength added to yours, we can hold the city until—" "Until what?" Aerys demanded. "Until Robert Baratheon's army arrives and we're caught between two forces. No, Tywin wants my throne. He's always wanted my throne. I see through his lies." "Your grace, without Lord Tywin's help, the city will fall." "Then let it fall," Aerys shrieked. "Let it all burn. Where is the hand? Where is Lord Rossart? Bring me my hand." The new hand of the king, a pyromancer named Rossart, who had risen to power by feeding Aerys's obsession with wildfire, hurried forward. "Your grace?" "The plan," Aerys said, his eyes glittering with madness. Execute the plan. Burn them all." Rossart bowed low. "Yes, Your Grace. I'll send word to the other pyromancers at once. We'll ignite the caches." "No." The voice came from Sir Jaime Lannister, who stepped forward from his place by the wall. "No, you won't." Everyone turned to stare at the young Kingsguard, Aerys's face purpled with rage. "What did you say to me?" "I said no, Your Grace." Jaime's voice was steady, but his hand rested on his sword hilt. "You're not going to burn this city. You're not going to kill 500,000 innocent people because you're afraid of losing your throne." "I am your king," Aerys screamed. "You swore an oath. You swore to obey me." "I swore to protect the realm," Jaime said, "and I will, even from you." What happened next took only moments, but would echo through history for generations. Sirdom, Jaime Lannister drew his sword, the white sword of the Kingsguard, symbol of purity and honor, and drove it through King Aerys II Targaryen's back, piercing his heart. The Mad King fell without a sound, blood pooling beneath him, his mad eyes finally going dark. Lord Rossart tried to run, but Jaime caught him at the door and killed him too, ensuring that the wildfire plot would die with its architect. In the terrible silence that followed, Jaime walked to the Iron Throne and sat down, his white cloak stained with his king's blood, his sword across his knees. "Open the gates," he said to the stunned guards. "Let my father in. The war is over." But the war was not quite over. Lord Tywin's forces entered King's Landing unopposed, and the Lannister soldiers spread through the city like a flood. Most were disciplined, following orders to secure key positions and disarm the loyalist forces. But some, particularly Sir Rhaegar Clegane and Sir Amory Lorch, two of Tywin's most brutal knights, had other ideas. They made their way to Maegor's Holdfast, where the royal family sheltered. The guards, seeing Lannister lions and assuming them allies, let them pass. Princess Elia heard them coming, the heavy footsteps, the scrape of armor on stone. She grabbed Rhaenys and pulled her behind her, placing herself between her children and the door. When Sir Rhaegar Clegane entered the chamber, he filled the doorway like a mountain given flesh. Behind him, Sir Amory Lorch drew his sword. "Princess," Gregor said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a massive man. "Lord Tywin sends his regards." Elia understood immediately. This was not protection. This was elimination. "My children," she said, her voice breaking. "Please, they're innocent. Let them live." "Lord Tywin wants no loose ends," Sir Amory said. "The Targaryen line ends today." What followed was butchery, not battle. Elia tried to fight, tried to shield her children with her own body, but she was small and weak from bearing children, no match for armored knights with murder in their hearts. They killed Rhaenys first, dragging her screaming from under her father's bed where she had tried to hide. Then they turned to little Aegon, barely a year old, and smashed his head against the wall. Finally, they killed Elia herself, slowly, cruelly, making her suffer for her husband's sins. When it was done, when the chambers were soaked in blood and the Targaryen children lay dead among their toys, Sir Gregor wrapped their bodies in red Lannister cloaks and carried them to the throne room. He dropped them at Robert Baratheon's feet like trophies. Robert had entered King's Landing hours after Tywin, expecting to find the city defended, ready for a final siege. Instead, he found the gates open, the Mad King dead, and Jaime Lannister sitting on the Iron Throne with blood on his hands. Now, looking down at the bodies of Rhaegar's children, Robert felt bile rise in his throat. "Gods," he whispered. "Gods, they're just babies." They were Targaryens, Tywin Lannister said coldly, standing beside the throne. The children of the man who stole your betrothed. Did you think we could let them live? The boy especially. He was Rhaegar's heir, and while he lived, there would always be those who would rally to his cause. He was a baby, Robert roared, a baby who couldn't even speak his own name. A baby who would have grown into a man, Tywin countered. A man with dragon's blood, with a claim to the throne you mean to take. Lord Stark will understand this when he arrives. Ned knows the necessity of... Don't. The voice came from the throne room doors, where Eddard Stark stood with his household guards, having ridden hard from the Trident. His face was grey with horror as he looked at the bodies. Don't you dare tell me I would understand this butchery, Lannister. Ned walked slowly across the throne room, his eyes taking in everything. The dead king on the floor, Jaime Lannister watching from the shadows, the murdered children at Robert's feet. This is what you wanted? He asked Robert quietly. This is your justice? I didn't order this, Robert protested. I never... Ned, you have to believe me. I wanted Rhaegar dead for taking Lyanna, but the children, gods, the children, were slaughtered like animals, Ned finished, because they had the misfortune to be born Targaryen. He looked at Tywin with disgust. You did this to curry favor with the new king. You murdered children to prove your loyalty, because you stood aside during the war and needed to make a grand gesture. I did what was necessary, Tywin said, unmoved. If you're too squeamish to understand that, Stark, then you don't understand how to rule. Then I hope I never learn. Ned turned to Robert. Where is Lyanna? If the war is over, we can get her back. Whatever Rhaegar did to her, whatever happened, she's safe now. Robert's face crumpled. We don't know where she is. Rhaegar never told anyone. He died without saying. Then we search, Ned said firmly. Every holdfast, every tower, every castle from here to Dawn. We find my sister, and we bring her home. But even as he spoke, Ned felt a cold certainty in his gut. Rhaegar had hidden Lyanna somewhere remote, somewhere defensible. And if the prince had left his best Kingsguard to protect her, as rumours suggested, then finding her might require more blood. And Ned Stark had already seen enough blood for a lifetime. 3 days later, Sir Barristan Selmy, who had been captured at the Trident and was being held in the Red Keep, received a visitor in his cell. Eddard Stark stood on the other side of the bars, his face drawn with exhaustion and grief. Sir Barristan, Ned said quietly, I need to know where Rhaegar took my sister. I know you were close to the prince. I know he trusted you. Please, where is Lyanna? Barristan looked at the young lord, seeing in him the honour and strength that had made Robert's cause a righteous one, even if its conclusion had been anything but. Prince Rhaegar spoke of a tower, he said finally. In Dawn, in the Red Mountains. He called it the Tower of Joy, though I suspect there was little joy in it. He left Sir Arthur Dayne to guard it, and Sir Oswell went, and Sir Gerald Hightower, his 3 best knights. 3 Kingsguard, Ned breathed, for one woman. Why would he? Because she carried his child, Barristan said quietly. The prophecy demanded 3 heads of the dragon, Lord Stark. Your sister was to give him the 3rd. Ned's hands clenched the bars. He got her with child, while married to another woman, while she was betrothed to Robert. He believed it was necessary, Barristan said, for the realm, for prophecy, for... He shook his head. It doesn't matter what he believed. He's dead, and whatever he set in motion cannot be stopped now. But Lord Stark, when you find your sister, when you bring her home—" The old knight's voice dropped to a whisper. "Be kind. She loved him. Whatever you think of Rhaegar, whatever crimes you lay at his feet, she loved him. And that child she carries is innocent of its father's sins." Ned said nothing, but his jaw clenched tight. He left the dungeons and gathered 6 of his best men, all Northerners, all men he trusted with his life. And together they rode south toward dawn, toward Red Mountains and a tower where his sister waited, where prophecy and love had created something that would change the world, though none of them, not even Ned Stark, could yet imagine how. The Tower of Joy rose from the Red Mountains like a finger pointing toward the sky, a small, lonely structure built for defense, not comfort. Its stones were the color of dried blood in the harsh, dawnish sun, and its single door was guarded by 3 men in white cloaks. Eddard Stark reined in his horse at the base of the hill, his 6 companions, Howland Reed, Willem Dustin, Ethan Glover, Martin Cassell, Theo Wool, and Sir Mark Riswell, fanning out behind him. They had ridden for weeks through the Red Mountains, following rumors and whispers, and now they had found what they sought. Or had they? For standing before that door were legends made flesh. Sir Arthur Dane, the Sword of the Morning, bearer of the greatsword Dawn, forged from the heart of a fallen star. Sir Oswell Went, the master of horse who could ride circles around any man alive. And Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, whose mere presence commanded respect. 3 of the finest knights in all the 7 kingdoms, standing guard over a tower in the middle of nowhere. "Lord Stark," Sir Arthur called down, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I wish you would have come sooner. We've been waiting." Ned dismounted slowly, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. "Waiting for what, Sir Arthur?" "For this," Arthur replied, gesturing at the confrontation. "For the end of what Prince Rhaegar began. For the reckoning that was always coming." "The war is over," Ned said. "King Aerys is dead. The Targaryens have fallen. I've come for my sister. Let me pass, and there need be no more bloodshed." "I wish it were that simple," Sir Gerald said, his voice heavy with regret. "But we swore an oath, Lord Stark. We swore to protect what Prince Rhaegar left in our care. My sister is not a possession to be protected." Ned's voice rose with anger. "She was taken from her home, her family." "She came willingly," Arthur interrupted. "I was there, Lord Stark. I witnessed it. She made her choice." "No woman chooses to be held in a tower while her family dies," Ned shouted. "My father and brother were murdered because of what Rhaegar did. Robert Baratheon marched to war because of it. And you stand there telling me she came willingly." The 3 Kingsguard exchanged glances, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, Arthur spoke again. "What we guard is more than your sister, Lord Stark, and if you would pass, you will have to come through us." Howland Reed stepped forward, his voice calm despite the tension. 7 against 3. You're great knights, but those are poor odds." "We've faced worse," Sir Oswell said with a grim smile, "and we've always known how this would end. The songs may not remember our names, but they'll remember we died true to our oaths." "Then let's not make songs," Ned said desperately. "Let's end this peacefully. I just want my sister. Whatever child she carries, I'll protect it. I'll raise it as my own if need be. Just let me pass." But Arthur Dane was already drawing dawn, the pale blade catching the sunlight like captured moonlight. I wish you good fortune in the wars to come, Lord Stark, and now it begins." "No," Ned said sadly, drawing his own sword. "Now it ends." The fight that followed would haunt Eddard Stark's dreams for the rest of his life. Sir Arthur Dayne moved like water and light, dawn singing through the air in great arcs that seemed impossible to parry. He killed Martin Cassel with his first strike, splitting the man's skull before anyone could react. Sir Oswell took down Theo Wool, his blade finding the gap between helm and breastplate. Sir Gerald, old but still deadly, traded blows with Willem Dustin and left him bleeding in the sand. Ned fought Arthur Dayne directly, and knew within moments that he was overmatched. The Sword of the Morning was everything the songs claimed, and more, faster, stronger, more skilled than any opponent Ned had ever faced. Only the interference of his companions, striking from multiple angles, kept Ned alive. One by one, his men fell. Ethan Glover, Sir Mark Raiswell. Even Willem Dustin, who had survived a dozen battles, died on Sir Gerald's sword. In the end, only Ned and Howland Reed remained, facing 3 Kingsguard who were barely winded. "It's over, Lord Stark," Arthur said, not without sympathy. "You fought well, but—" That was when Howland Reed did something that would never appear in any song. The Crannogman carried a net, a simple hunter's net, weighted with stones. As Arthur moved in for the final strike, Howland threw it with desperate precision, tangling Dawn and Arthur's sword arm for just a moment. It was enough. Ned drove his sword through Sir Arthur Dayne's neck, and the greatest knight of his generation fell to the red sand, Dawn clattering from his hand. Howland's poisoned dagger found Sir Oswell's ribs, and the white bull Sir Gerald fell to Ned's blade moments later, still fighting even as his blood pooled beneath him. When it was done, when 7 men lay dead or dying in the shadow of the tower, Ned Stark dropped to his knees beside Sir Arthur Dayne. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You were a good man. You deserved better than this." Arthur's hand found Ned's arm, his grip surprisingly strong despite the blood soaking into the sand. "Promise me, Ned. Promise me you'll protect the child. Not for Rhaegar's sake. Gods know he made terrible choices, but for the child's sake. He's innocent. He?" Ned asked. "A boy," Arthur gasped. "She named him Aegon. John. I don't remember. She's dying, Ned. The birth. There were complications. Promise me." "I promise," Ned said, tears streaming down his face. "I swear it." Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, died with a smile on his face, believing that at least this one oath would be kept. Ned climbed the tower stairs with Howland Reed behind him, his legs like lead, his heart hammering in his chest. At the top, in a room that smelled of blood and birthing, he found his sister. Lyanna lay in a bed soaked crimson, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her grey eyes like his own, focused on the bundle in her arms. She looked up as Ned entered, and her smile was radiant despite her pallor. "Ned," she whispered, "you came. I knew you would." "Lyanna." He was at her side in 3 strides, taking her hand. It was cold, so cold. "What did he do to you? What—" "He loved me," Lyanna interrupted, and there was no regret in her voice, only a strange peace. "And I loved him. I know you don't understand, Ned. I know the realm thinks I was stolen, that I was dishonored. But I chose this. I chose him, and I would choose it again." "You're dying," Ned said, his voice breaking. "The birthing. Lyanna, why didn't you send for help? Why didn't you—" "Because the child matters more than I do," she said simply. She looked down at the baby in her arms, a tiny thing with dark hair and eyes that would someday be grey as winter. He's the prince that was promised, Ned. The song of ice and fire. Rhaegar told me everything. About the prophecy, about the darkness coming, about why this child had to be born. Prophecy, Ned said bitterly. Prophecy got father and Brandon killed. It started a war. It destroyed the realm. And this child will save it, Lyanna insisted, her grip tightening on his hand. When the darkness comes, when the long night returns, he'll stand against it. That's why Rhaegar did what he did. That's why I came with him. Not for love alone, though gods know I loved him, but for this. For the child who will matter when all of us are dust. You're speaking in riddles, Ned said desperately. Lyanna, please. His name is Aegon, she continued, as if he hadn't spoken. But you can't call him that. Robert, gods, Robert will kill him if he knows. If anyone knows he's Rhaegar's son, he'll die. You have to protect him, Ned. You have to hide him. How? Ned asked. How can I hide a child everyone will be looking for? Lyanna's smile was sad and knowing. You've always been so honourable, Ned, so dedicated to doing what's right. Now I'm asking you to lie. I'm asking you to protect this child at the cost of your own honour. Understanding dawned slowly, terribly. You want me to claim him as mine, as my bastard. Yes, Lyanna breathed. Your bastard son, born to some woman during the war. No one will question it. Men father bastards all the time, even honourable men like you. And in the north, at Winterfell, he'll be safe. He'll grow strong. And when the darkness comes... Her voice was fading, growing weaker. When it comes, he'll be ready. Promise me, Ned, she whispered, echoing Arthur Dayne's dying words. Promise me you'll protect him. Promise me you'll raise him to be good and true and strong. Promise me. I promise, Ned said through his tears. I swear it by the old gods and the new. I'll protect him. I'll raise him as my own. No one will ever know. Lyanna's eyes closed, and her hand went slack in his. John, she breathed with her last breath. His name is John. And then she was gone, the sister Ned had ridden thousands of miles to save, who had been the cause of so much death and war and sorrow. She died holding the child she believed would save the world, believing her sacrifice had meaning beyond the pain it caused. Ned Stark held his sister's body and wept until he had no more tears left to shed. They burned the bodies at the base of the tower, the 7 Northmen, the 3 Kingsguard, all together. Ned spoke words over them, prayers to the old gods and the new, though he doubted any gods would listen. Then he took Dawn, Sir Arthur Dayne's ancestral blade, and wrapped it carefully. It would go to Starfall, to Arthur's sister Ashara, along with word of her brother's death. A small honour, but all Ned could offer. And he took the baby. John, Lyanna had called him, though his true name was Rhaegar Targaryen, 6th of his name, prince and heir to a fallen dynasty, the 3rd head of the dragon that his father had sacrificed everything to create. What will you tell Lord Robert? Howland Reed asked, as they prepared to leave. That I found Lyanna dying, Ned said. That Rhaegar's men killed my companions. That she died in my arms, begging me to bury her in Winterfell beside father and Brandon. And the child? My bastard son, Ned said, the lie tasting, like poison in his mouth. Born to a woman named Willa during the war. That's what I'll tell Robert, what I'll tell Catelyn, what I'll tell everyone who asks. Jon Snow, my shame, my dishonour. To protect the boy, Howland said, understanding. To keep a promise, Ned replied. To my dying sister, to Sir Arthur Dane, too. He looked down at the baby in his arms, who had stopped crying, and was looking up at him with eyes that would one day be grey as a winter storm. To the future, perhaps. If Lyanna and Rhaegar were right about the prophecy, if the darkness really is coming, then this child may be all that stands between the realm and destruction. And if they were wrong, Howland asked gently, if it was all madness and obsession, if thousands died for a prophecy that meant nothing. Ned looked at the funeral pyre, where the smoke carried the souls of good men to whatever awaited them beyond this world. He thought of his father and brother, murdered by a mad king. He thought of Rhaegar, dying in a river for a dream. He thought of Alia Martell and her children, butchered for the crime of existing. Then I'll raise him anyway, he said quietly. Because he's innocent of his father's sins, because Lyanna loved him, because... He paused, searching for words. Because sometimes the only way to make meaning out of madness is to protect what's left when the madness ends. They rode north, 2 men and a baby, carrying secrets that would reshape the realm. Behind them, the Tower of Joy stood empty, its purpose fulfilled, its story ended. Or perhaps just beginning. Epilogue, Songs and Memories. Years later, in the archives of the Citadel, Maester Samwell Tarly carefully transcribed the final pages of his chronicle, The Life and Death of Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, a study in prophecy and tragedy. What do you make of it all? His assistant asked, reading over his shoulder. Was the prince mad like his father? Or was he a hero trying to save the world? Sam set down his quill and thought about Jon Snow, now Jon Stark, revealed as Aegon Targaryen, who had indeed stood against the darkness when the long night returned, who had united the realm against the dead, who had fulfilled the prophecy his father died believing in. I think, Sam said slowly, that Prince Rhaegar was a man who believed so completely in prophecy that he was willing to destroy everything to fulfill it. And in a terrible way, he was right. The darkness did come. His son did matter. The third head of the dragon was necessary. So he was a hero. No, Sam said firmly. Heroes don't get to sacrifice other people for their visions. Heroes don't abandon their families, start wars, or hide behind prophecy to justify their actions. Rhaegar Targaryen was a man who saw a terrible truth and made terrible choices to address it. He was right about the prophecy, but that doesn't make what he did right. Then what was he? Sam looked out the window of the citadel, toward the distant north, where Jon, Aegon, had chosen to go after everything was finished, walking away from thrones and kingdoms to find peace beyond the wall. Tragic, Sam said finally. Rhaegar was tragic. He saw what was coming, and he did what he thought he had to do, and it cost him everything. His honor, his family, his life, his legacy. The realm remembers him as a villain or a fool, even though his son saved the world. That's the cruelest irony of all. He picked up his quill again and wrote the final words of his chronicle. Prince Rhaegar Targaryen died believing he was saving the world. In a way, he did. But the cost, in blood, in honor, in the lives of innocents, was so high that history may never forgive him for it. Perhaps that is what prophecy demands. Everything. And perhaps that is why wise men fear prophecy more than death itself. The dragon had 3 heads, and the realm burned to make it so. Whether that burning was necessary or merely inevitable, I leave for wiser scholars than I to determine. I know only this. Jon Snow, who was Rhaegar Targaryen, who was the prince that was promised, lived up to his father's hopes and his mother's sacrifice. The Song of Ice and Fire saved the realm from the long night. But oh, what a terrible price was paid for that salvation. The dragon is dead. Long live the dragon. And may the gods grant us mercy if prophecy ever demands such sacrifice again. In Winterfell, in the crypts where the Stark dead slept in endless rows, there was a statue that few people ever visited. It stood in a corner, half hidden by shadows, a young woman with a crown of winter roses, her face at peace, her arms cradling something to her chest. The inscription read simply, Lyanna Stark, daughter of the North. She lived for love and died with honor. The gods keep her. But those who knew the truth, and there were few, so few, understood the real inscription, the words that could never be carved in stone. She believed in prophecy. She believed in a prince who saw darkness coming, and she gave everything, her home, her family, her life, to bring forth a child who would stand against the night. Whether that made her brave or foolish, wise or mad, the histories would never agree. But the darkness came, as promised, and her son stood against it, as foretold, and the realm survived. Perhaps that is all that matters in the end.